Thank you for joining us today on the Moms Who Know podcast, the podcast for moms who know that when they take care of themselves, they can take better care of everyone else. I am so excited to share today's episode with you. My guest is a good friend of mine, Charlene Heitritter, and she just opens up in this episode about her struggles with anxiety and depression. And as I've thought about this episode and edited and done everything to get ready for it, I've just been so blown away by her willingness to be open and to share some of the things that she shares. I know that this episode is going to help people. And if you know anyone who is struggling with anxiety or depression or has recently had a baby, any of those people will benefit from this episode. And so I encourage you to share it with them. Let's get to the show with Charlene. Hello and welcome to the Moms Who Know podcast. I'm your host, Chanel Nielsen, and my guest today is Charlene Heitritter. Charlene, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, Charlene is a good friend. We've known each other for, I was trying to think how long, probably 11-ish years. Or so?
Yeah, 11, 12 years probably. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it's been a while and Charlene is just amazing. So I will do a little intro and share my thoughts on you, and then you can follow it up with, some more details. But Charlene is a mom of five boys, and she's just one of those women who just can take on anything. She just takes it and runs with it and just handles stuff. And, she's a good speaker. She's a good mom. She just is one of those that you're like, oh my goodness, how does she do it? And one of the things that I also have found amazing about Charlene, and this is what we're going to talk about today, is that when she was struggling with, postpartum depression and anxiety, she was really forthcoming about it. And I think that is a hard thing to do. I think it's very easy to not tell other people. And, Charlene, you really opened up to people. And I think that was helpful. And I think this is going to be helpful for you to open up on the show and help other women who are dealing with this. So to start off, anything I missed in your introduction, tell us a little bit more about you and your family.
Okay, I will. Thank you for that nice introduction. By the way, I was nodding my head, but you can't see that, over the airwaves. But my husband and I have been married for 15 years. We met in high school. We dated through college, and we got married right after college. So we've been married for 15 years, and we have 5 boys. And they range in age. My oldest is 12, and then I have a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old. Oh, wait, did I miss somebody in there? Yeah, 12, 9, 7, 5. And then the baby now, he's not a baby anymore. He's almost 2.5. So that's my family. I'm a stay-at-home mom for all those boys.
Okay, awesome. I love it. When you have 5, it's hard to keep all their ages straight. They keep changing.
That is the truth.
Yeah. It gets confusing. So I get you there. Now, let's talk a little bit. Your postpartum anxiety and depression, I know, was really severe with your 5th baby, but you had some experiences with it before. So talk to us about what it was like with your other babies.
Okay. So with all of my babies, I did have what I would call like the postpartum blues or the baby blues. I noticed it with my oldest. I felt fine in the hospital. I came home, and after a day or two after he was born, I just was really feeling kind of down. And it was just kind of like textbook baby blues that lasted for about a week or two, maybe about 10 days. And it wasn't all consuming, but it was hard. A lot of hormones, a lot of change. And it kind of took me by surprise with my first one. And then when I had my second one, I was kind of expecting it a little bit, and it was the same, those blues for about a week or so. And then after that, I kind of, felt like it was old hat. So I was expecting it with all my babies, and it was the same with all my babies. And then after about a week or 10 days or so, I feel like I would just kind of snap out of it. I would get back into a routine. My husband would go back to work, and I would kind of think, okay, I got this. I can do this. would get myself working again and felt like my old self again. And then that was the end of that for my first 4 babies. And yeah, it was different with my last baby. It was different.
Okay, so with this baby blues and dealing with that, what I want to know a little bit more specifically what it was like so we can kind of see the contrast. So just
Right.
crying a lot or
It was I was crying. I was crying. I feel like mostly I just felt kind of sad. I felt overwhelmed. I felt like I was worried about being able to take care of things. I was worried about my husband going back to work and that I wouldn't be able to handle everything. I just really felt kind of heavy hearted and down. Nothing in particular. It's like I loved my babies where I was obsessed with them, but I was just overtired and so many emotions all there at once. And I always feel really sensitive to new moms because I kind of always assumed that that's something that everybody went through, though that initial baby blues, which isn't the case, but I think it is pretty common. But yeah, it was just mostly just feeling down and overwhelmed and just kind of worried that I wasn't going to feel um, like I had things under control and that I felt would feel super happy again, like I was before I had the baby. It just felt like everything was turned on its head.
okay. Thanks. Okay, that gives us a really clear picture of what that was like because, especially moms, people who haven't had kids or people who haven't experienced this baby blues. And I would say, I don't really think that I have. I mean, definitely the tired part and the overwhelm,
Right.
but it's more in the moment, like the baby's crying and I'm tired and I just
Yes.
want to go to sleep. But then I get to sleep and it's over. It's not something that lingers. So this is a little bit different.
Right.
Now, after your fifth baby, tell us what that was like and what that experience was like for you.
Okay. So after my fifth baby, Hayes is his name. So I had Hayes in August of 2016. And it was this similar thing. I had those baby blues. In fact, it feels a little different even from the beginning. I feel like the onset of those baby blues was a little bit later than it had been with my other babies. It didn't start like 24 hours after I had the baby. It felt like it started about 3 or 4 days after I had the baby, where I thought I had kind of escaped it for this baby. And then about 3 or 4 days after I had him, my mom went home. She had stayed with me for a few days. She went home and it kind of hit me right then. And I thought, oh, here's the baby blues again. I got these blues again. And it felt like the same symptoms that I had had with my other 4 boys. And then it probably took about 10 days from that point until I felt really, pretty much better. And so I was about 2 weeks postpartum by that point. And I thought, okay, I'm good. And I felt pretty much okay. And then there was just little things that lingered that I didn't say to myself, these are the baby blues, or this sounds like postpartum depression or anxiety. It was just little things like I felt kind of foggy headed. I felt more prone to getting down. I felt more, I'm trying to think exactly how I felt there because it wasn't super severe. It was small things that you could explain away that you were super tired, that you were the mom of 5 young kids, those types of things. But I just didn't feel right. I didn't feel like myself. And then I had a situation at 3 months postpartum where I had basically a panic attack. And so I can tell you more about that. I had let me see, that was in November of 2016. So Hayes was 3 months old, and I had just started worrying about him in particular hitting his milestone. And so I started noticing things that he was doing. And I'm a mom of 5. So at this point, it doesn't seem like anything should surprise me. I feel like I should have been like, oh, all the kids did this, or all the kids did something similar. He was sitting in his little chair, I remember, and he kept looking. It looked like he was looking up at the ceiling, and he would do it all the time. And it was really starting to worry me. And I thought, oh no, what if he has autism, or what if there's some kind of delay that he's going to have? And I got myself really worried about it. And it just kind of simmered for a couple of weeks. And then I remember one particular day, I just really felt very, very nervous and anxious about it. And so I started Googling about it, which is the absolute worst thing that you could ever do. And so I started Googling, what is wrong with my baby? What if he does this? What if he does that? And I got myself really upset and worried that it was possible that he had autism or was on the autism spectrum, or that there was something that was wrong. I was convinced that something was wrong. I even remember contacting a girlfriend of mine who has a son who is on the autism spectrum and saying, "Hey, when did you notice with him that things were off, that things were different than your other children?" Because I felt so nervous. And I remember her trying to calm me and saying, "Don't Google it. Don't worry about it. She was so sympathetic. It was like, I understand that you're worried, but try not to let it consume you right now." And I remember that just being a really tough time. And then some of the things that would come into play later really came into play then, where I got extremely anxious, where I almost had a panic attack. I had trouble breathing. My heart was racing. I lost my appetite. I remember I didn't eat the entire day. I was crying. I was talking to my husband, looking for validation. "Do you think this is wrong? Do you worry about this?" All that, wanting, him to calm my fears. And I remember that just being a really hard day, and the next day being a really hard day. And then I kind of got over that period. But that was one that I really always looked to. Like, that was really the start of my symptoms after that were different than any of my other kids. I had never been that way before. I had never worried like that before. I had never, I just always felt like I was the kind of person that was like, we'll take things as they come. I don't worry too much ahead of time. I'm not a fearful person. I feel like I'm a positive person. And so it was very out of character for me.
Yeah. I mean, even just knowing you, hearing that experience is like, yeah, this is not Charlene's normal. Like, you're not one to just go down that rabbit hole and think of all these scary things. Like, just even in conversation, it's just like, okay, we'll deal with that when it comes. So definitely out of the norm for you.
I remember, in fact, when that happened, saying to my husband, "Do you know, this feels like right after I have the baby and I have those blues and I feel like worried and nervous and sad." And he said, "You're 3 months postpartum. You're still in that period." In my mind, that was done with. And so any symptoms that I was having then were in no way related to the baby. It definitely wasn't postpartum anxiety or depression. It was just like, oh, this weird thing is happening to me. And I wasn't even connecting those two things, that they were related. So it was a weird time. It was a very strange situation for me.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting that you didn't connect it, and yet you did on a certain level, that you could say, this feels like how that was before. And yeah, just different than, saying, oh, clearly I like before. And it's funny because when you've had 5 babies, you're like, I got this. I know what to expect. I've been around the block a time or two. And so you think you know what to expect, and you think you know how your body's going to react. And yet, to have it come so much later and so much more severe was, of course, a big surprise.
Right.
There.
It definitely was.
So moving on from there, then what else, as time transpired, what continued to happen?
Okay. So that was in November of 2016. I was 3 months postpartum then. And I feel like there was a really bad spell, and then there would be just like a regular normal, it kind of like a status quo. Like we fell into a routine that was manageable. My life was manageable. It didn't feel exactly right to me. I felt like something was off. But since it was manageable, I let things go for a long time. And thinking, I think as new moms, especially, and to people who have postpartum anxiety or depression, you can explain away a lot of symptoms that you have by saying, well, of course I'm overwhelmed. I have a new baby. Of course I'm tired. The baby never sleeps. I'm not getting any exercise. I'm not eating well. I'm nursing, all day long, and I'm, all these different things. And so I felt like a lot of symptoms I had, I thought, well, when Kay starts sleeping through the night, this will be easier. Or when I start exercising again, it'll be easier. Or once I stop nursing, it'll be easier. And I was just kind of waiting for my old personality to come back, for the old me to come back. without doing anything on my part. I was just kind of explaining away everything. And so I felt like that's kind of the way it went for like another 3 months, where I just didn't feel exactly right. And it was the same types of things where I was still feeling anxious, not super anxious at that point, but I felt fatigued. I felt more often than I had in the past to feel agitated and kind of short of patience with my other children. I felt kind of like I was in a bubble and I wasn't really able to connect with people super well. And it didn't seem that way to the outside. I think if you would talk to anybody, my friends or even my family members in that time period, they would not have thought that anything was wrong with me right there, because I was still continuing on to take, I was making dinner every night. My kids were getting to school every day. I was, busy with church responsibilities and things, and everything was getting done, but I just didn't feel right. And that went on for sure the first 6 or 7 months after Hayes was born. And then eventually I'm sorry, you probably have a follow-up question there.
No, keep going. Okay. This is good stuff.
I had my yearly physical with a doctor, and it was a new family medicine doctor to me. I had never seen her before because our insurance had changed. And so I was about 6 months postpartum, 6 or 7 months, and I went to my yearly physical, and I thought, I'm going to tell her that things haven't been exactly right. But I did not feel confident at all. I felt still at that point like I should be able to get over this by myself. I should be able to work through this. And I felt kind of a little bit of a sense of shame that I was not feeling good yet. It's like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not able to snap on out of this? It was just really frustrating for me. And so even going to that doctor's appointment, I didn't have the confidence to say, hey, something is wrong with me and I know it and I need help. I just kind of was like, hey, by the way, I'm feeling a little tired and exhausted and feeling kind of anxious and down sometimes. And I didn't speak with the confidence that something was really wrong. And then and this doctor said, oh, of course you feel that way. You have 5 kids. You're going to be tired. And I said, it feels maybe a little bit more than that. And she said, I remember clearly her saying, well, you don't want medication, right? And I thought, oh, okay, no, I guess I don't. Like, I kind of felt embarrassed almost that she had said it in that way, like, you don't need medication. And so I said, okay, no, I don't think I want to take medicine. And I left it at that. And I remember coming home that day feeling kind of frustrated because I knew something was wrong. It wasn't to a really unmanageable point yet, but I felt kind of hopeless that I was going to start feeling better anytime soon because I didn't have a plan of action at that point at all. So that's kind of where I was at that point. And this is 6 or 7 months postpartum. So it was almost starting to feel like I was getting out of that postpartum area. And still I wasn't feeling better yet.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That is, I just think that is so great that you brought this whole idea out of not having the confidence to ask for help, that, there's this part of you that just feels, and you mentioned the word shame, afraid, embarrassed, all these things to ask for help. That something's off. And so that's really also a great thing for any medical practitioners to be aware of, right? Like right. People cannot always say what they need, or for us as moms, our kids can't always say it. And so we have to not go in. You don't need help, yes, right?
Right. Yeah.
We have to be sensitive to that. So what happened next?
Okay. So after that, by about, when Hayes was about 8 months old, I feel like a defining point in this whole thing was about May of 2017 at this point. He was a healthy, like crawling, busy 8-month-old, super sweet and cute. And he obviously was hitting all of these milestones that had freaked me out back 5 months before. That had been kind of my laser focus of my anxiety, was that something might not be wrong with him. Well, he was clearly doing fine, but I was still having these symptoms. I still had this illness. And so I kind of transferred that anxiety and worry onto one of my older sons. And I put my laser focus on him. And I suddenly became very worried about him and his personal development. And I don't know why. I don't know why it was him, but I transferred all that worry. And then at that point, he was 4. I think he was 4. And I just started really worrying about him. And same things. Googling, is this normal for him to be doing this? Is it, what if he does this? And getting myself really worried, getting myself really worked up. And then all that familiar stuff came back because I had something in my mind to really worry about. I lost my appetite. I lost a lot of weight. I I was having trouble even being at home was hard because I was worried about so many things at home. Here I am. If you're worried about flying on an airplane, it's easier to avoid flying on an airplane than it is if you're worried specifically about your child and you're with your child 24 hours a day because he's not at school and you're with him all day. And so it was hard for me to be home. I started feeling almost like a child, I felt very dependent on my husband to be there. I felt more calm and relaxed when he was home. So all day long when he was at work, I was worried. I couldn't wait for him to come home. When he came home, I would, I remember spending a lot of time in my room, in my bed. I kept thinking if I could just make it till bedtime, then I can go to sleep and then I won't have to worry about this for a few hours, or maybe when I wake up, I'll feel better, or this will all be done. And even um, and that's almost kind of sugarcoating some of the things. I mean, thoughts can get really darker than that, where you think things like, um, I I am not a good mom. I maybe shouldn't have, I wish I hadn't had kids. I wish I could just run away. I never had trouble bonding. Another thing that was hard for me is a lot of times people talk about postpartum depression and anxiety, and they talk about a lack of bonding that you have with your baby, which is only one symptom, of course, that not everybody has. And so I didn't have any trouble bonding with my baby. I love my baby. I always wanted to be with him. So a lot of my thoughts would be, I wish I could take the baby and run away from home. I wish I could just go stay in a hotel for a week, or I wish I could go someplace. And I mean, that's when my husband really started to get concerned, because I'm the type of person who doesn't, it's hard for me to go out on a date night. I miss the kids, or we never go on vacations without the kids. It was just very out of character for me to be thinking things like that. I remember thinking things like the specific thoughts or worries I had about my son. I remember thinking specifically, I love him so much. Maybe it would be better for him if he died rather than have to go through the things that I was worried about him going through. All of these things that were created in my mind, things like that were alarming for me. I obviously would never think about things like that as a mother. And I remember thinking, not that I was suicidal, not that I ever considered taking my own life, but clearly over and over, I would think, if this is how my life is going to be for the rest of my life, I would rather not live. It is hard to imagine having a life like this forever. And anxiety and depression can really play a lot of tricks on you and tell you this is your life from here on out. You're never going to feel better. You maybe never felt good before. You can't even remember feeling good before. You don't remember what it felt like to be happy, to be light. And so I just remember all of these thoughts going through my head. And finally, in May of 2017, I remember looking it up online and putting some of the symptoms I was feeling, thinking I don't feel right. Like, and it had gotten to a point where I was clearly like things weren't manageable anymore, where I wanted to sleep a lot, where I was crying and anxious and sad. It was difficult for me to keep on with my daily life. And I remember coming across this checklist on a website called postpartumprogress.com. And it talked about if you have some of these depression symptoms or anxiety symptoms, and you've had them for like not just here or there or a day, but continuing, they're continuing on. And a lot of the things that I just said were on that list. And I thought, yes, it says this. It says, your heart is racing and your mind is worried and you feel overwhelmed and you feel guilty and you wish you could run away. And all these things that I had been thinking in my head were there on the computer, and I felt so validated seeing that there it is. There's something wrong. It's like at that moment I thought, yes, there's something wrong with me. I mean, that sounds silly to say it like that, because all this had been going on, But really, you can play tricks with yourself so much and say, come on, like snap out of it, feel better, that when you really go, okay, something is wrong. And now I need to do something about it. It can feel very empowering to think that there's something that I can do that's going to make me feel better. I know it. So now I got to get it. I got to get after that.
Yes, I think that that's amazing. And it really makes sense how that would be empowering. Like, okay, I'm not stuck here and I'm not making this up. There's legitimately something that I can do. I can make progress on. So I just want to say I'm so grateful for that you are so willing to share even some of those dark thoughts, that went through your mind. And I'm grateful because as other people struggle with this, that validation and that empowerment can come to them through hearing this and going, oh, it's not that I'm a horrible person with, murderous thoughts or whatever. It's just I'm going through this and I need help. And then that's okay. That's my next step. So my question for you then is, how did you get so brave? What allowed you to be able to share this?
That's a good question. I think that what it is I think that most people can understand a situation where you felt really scared or sad. You felt almost as if if you said it out loud, that it was going to, um, it's just sometimes it feels too hard to say things out loud, or you might start crying, or you might be misunderstood. And so that fear keeps you kind of quiet. And I just felt like going through my daily life, it was harder for me to pretend like I was feeling okay. And I didn't look okay. Like I had lost a lot of weight, and I just looked, I felt like I didn't have a light inside. I just felt like the light had gotten turned off. That's what it felt like I was just a shell of a person. And so it was, I think, obvious to people. And I had been a little bit more open with family, but I just started saying things to people. Some friends I knew that had suffered from anxiety, I talked to them, and mine was different. Everybody is different. That's the hard thing, but mine was different. But those people, would lend an ear and say, oh yes, here's something that might help you. It helped me. And having that kind of camaraderie with a couple of friends was really helpful. And so when people would ask me how I was doing, then I thought, I'm just going to tell them. I mean, I had a little bit of a hesitation because I didn't want, in the eyes of other people, to be this broken person. I didn't want people to see me, and for the rest of, my life, people would see me and say, there's the girl who has depression and anxiety and is super down and sad. I didn't want to be a person like that. I didn't want to be a label like that. But I also didn't want to pretend like everything was okay. And so I would start telling people, I'm really struggling and I'm really having a hard time. And I was just kind of flabbergasted how many people would say, oh, yes, I went through something similar like that. I mean, I felt like almost every time I talked about it, people would say, I know what you're talking about. Maybe it wasn't that extreme, or maybe sometimes it was more severe than what I had been going through. But it was a lot more common than I thought, because nobody that I never saw people talking about it. I never heard people talking about it. And so, and maybe I just wasn't listening. I don't know. But it felt like not only did it make me feel better to let that out, so it wasn't just sitting there like a heavy load on me, I could let it out and let people share in that with me and help me and be, my support there. But also that they were saying, I really see you and understand what you're going through, because I've been there too, which was it was just shocking to me.
Yeah. Well, and it's awesome that connection that builds. Then all of a sudden you're not alone anymore. And like, oh, this is okay. I'm not some weirdo to have gone through this. This is just something part of life that people go through.
Right.
So much good stuff that you've shared with us already. I would love, in the time we have left, what would you tell people who are facing similar situations? Just some of the things that you have learned through this journey.
I like that you said things I've learned, because I really have learned a lot. I feel like when you're in the thick of things, especially depression and anxiety, when you're right in the depths of it, you don't remember ever felt good. You can't remember what it feels like to feel good. And when you are out of that horrible depths, when you do start to feel better, it really is kind of hard to remember how bad it was, which is also a blessing. But I feel like I've learned a lot about myself and going through that. And even though every day isn't that horrible struggle that it used to be, I feel like the person that I am now is the person I used to be and better, with extra empathy and understanding and knowledge that I can get through hard things. And so I do feel like I've learned a lot. But one of the first thing I would say that I really learned is that, and I would tell people, new moms, or if it isn't postpartum anxiety and depression, just anybody, is just to really trust yourself and to know yourself. You know yourself, you know your body and your mind, and you know if something's wrong. And I feel like you can second guess it until the cows come home. But I just would really encourage people to say, hey, I don't feel good. I know something's wrong, and I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to get help, because like right now at the beginning, because I know that something's wrong. I can tell that something's off. So that's the first thing I would say, is just to really trust yourself. The second thing I would say is depression and anxiety is an illness. It's like what I said so many times when I was going through it is, it's like a broken arm. And so if you had a broken arm, you wouldn't say, oh, I'm just going to be super tough and try and like muscle through this. You would go to the doctor and you would get an x-ray, and you would get a cast, and you would get it treated. And I feel like mental illness is this thing where people are like, shh, don't talk about it, or don't like muscle through it, get through it. It's not your fault. It's not anything that you did wrong to cause it. You didn't do anything wrong. It's an illness. It's a sickness. And so the way I thought about it was, my mind is sick and I need treatment. I need to help it. And treatment is tons of different things. It's maybe medication or not medication. It's lots of different ways that you can do that. In my situation, I did get medication, which was helpful, but it's just like a broken arm or a broken leg. You just have to seek treatment. Allow yourself to ask for help. And if the first doctor, like my doctor, said, oh, you don't need medication, right? Everything's fine, right? I didn't have the confidence at that point to say, no, everything's not fine. And so I let it go longer than I should have. But since that doctor obviously wasn't going to be on my side about it, I found another doctor and I explained my symptoms, and that doctor said, oh, yes, you have postpartum depression and anxiety. At this point, I'm 8 or 9 months postpartum. So it's like, it didn't need to go that far. I allowed myself finally to ask for help and to be confident that I needed help. And then I received help, which was life-changing for me. The third thing I would say is to find people who support you. Surround yourself with friends and family and medical professionals who will fight for you and understand you and support you. And I think that when you're already fragile, that people, even if they mean well, sometimes can really send you spiraling. They can validate your deep fears if you tell them, I'm really worried about this, and they say, oh yes, I've noticed that too. That happened to me one time, and I nearly died. It was like, see, it's not just in my head. Everybody thinks this. Or sometimes people can tell you, hey, try and drink lots of water or get more sleep. And they do mean well. People mean well, but sometimes you need somebody that says, I understand that you're going through this hard thing, and really is on your side and helps you. So a good support system, I think, is super important. And the last thing I would say is that just don't believe the lies that anxiety and depression will tell you. In your mind, I was told, my mind was saying, you are never going to get better. You're never going to be back the way that you were. You're this new, sad, awful, terrible person, anxious person. And every day is going to be a struggle, and every day is going to be hard, and you're never going to get better. And that was really scary for me. And once I started getting better, you could see, no, that's not true. I am going to get better. I'm not going to feel this way forever. This was a setback. This was an illness. And I'm treating the illness, and I'm starting to feel better. And then sometimes you have setbacks. It doesn't mean once you start treating it. I think by about September of 2017, so it was about 6 to 12 weeks after I started treatment, I was feeling consistently better. And since September of 2017, I've felt consistently better. But that doesn't mean that every day is wonderful. It doesn't mean that that it hasn't been hard in there sometimes. But I have the faith and the hope that things are going to get better, that I'm on an upward trajectory here because I am receiving treatment. So I am feeling better. And I know that one bad day or two bad days or even a week doesn't mean I'm going to get back to that low place again. I know that I can be back my old self again. And I have been that person. And so I would just say, really, that there is so much hope that you cannot worry that you're not going to be that person again, because you can be your old self again and better. You can see the blessings that have come from a trial like that, and just really, you can really have a happy life again. You can have a happy ending there. That's what I would say to anybody who's going through that.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I love it so much. I think that you have given people so much hope. And I think you've really helped me to see, how much hope people need when they are in that situation. It's so easy to just feel like it's never going to get better. And this is so bad. And so if this, this conversation can give people this glimmer of hope, then they can take that next step to get the help they need and to come out on the other side better than ever, which you clearly have. You're amazing. So thank you again. Thank you for being with us today. And thank you everyone for listening to Moms Who Know. I hope you guys loved that episode as much as I did. I learned so much and was just uplifted and just thought that was a great conversation. Now, I want to start something new, and this is an idea that I had recently that just came to me. And I have learned over the course of my life that when things come to me in that way, that I need to act. And what it is I want to start having a discussion question with each podcast. This is a question that will be asked on social media. I'll ask it here, and then you can come and answer it on social media. And I hope you will come there and answer it. But I know not everyone is on social media. And so I want to say that's okay too. I will pose this question at the end of each episode, and you can just answer it to yourself if you're not a social media person. Having a conversation with others is fun, and I encourage you to do that either on Facebook or Instagram at Moms Who Know Podcast. But if this is just something that gets you thinking, then mission accomplished. So the question for today's episode is this: on your dark days, what gives you hope? So I hope you'll give that some thought. And if some things come to you to share, I'd love it if you come over and share those. Have a great day. And thanks again for joining us on Moms Who Know.